Interesting talk. You know, one thing I noticed yesterday, I arrived right around lunchtime, the middle of the day. I didn't manage to get lunch, as I'm sure many of you also waited quite a while, didn't manage to get lunch, but it made me think about how much this conference has grown. This is my 4th year up on the stage here in a row, and each year the conference has gotten not only larger, but has included a more and more relevant crowd. Each year, the networking, the crowd that's attracted, the attendees, the speakers, are more and more relevant and involved in many of the critical issues that we as a security community are dealing with on a regular basis. So it's really quite a pleasure to be here. Our next speaker is also a repeat speaker. He's been here in the past. He's someone who I've known for a long time, since my days when I lived in the US. And despite the fact that he's known me for a while, he agreed to speak on the panel that I'm chairing. So I do appreciate that. Ian's right, tough crowd, that's all right. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up our next speaker, Dr. Douglas Maughan, Director of the Cybersecurity Division, Science and Technology Directorate, Department of Homeland Security, United States.
Thank you very much, Josh, and it's great to see you again. I think I first met Josh about 10 years ago when he was actually a U.S. government employee, and he's made great strides, gone to a contractor, and now a startup. So congratulations, Josh, with your startup, and good luck. It's interesting that yesterday there was a number of conversations about borders and whether there are actually any cyber borders or not. Yet the title of our panel is Protecting Our Cyber Borders. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about borders in the U.S. Tom Bossert yesterday mentioned briefly the executive order that was published from the White House in May. It focused on 4 key areas. Just as Ian talked about, one of the key areas for us is focusing on our federal network borders. The goal of the executive order is to hold our government responsible for protecting our government systems. We've had a little bit of problem with that in the past, as has been mentioned before. The executive order talks a lot about risk management, and we've been talking about that a lot yesterday also. And last but not least is similar to what Ian's talked about in the UK. We need to change the game here and look at new architectures. We have to push towards more shared services. We have small government departments that we're expecting them to have a CIO or an IT person who actually doesn't know how to run IT. So let's take this to a model where large pieces of the government are protected because we're doing shared services, email, cloud and mobility and other types of things. So that will, we expect, protect our federal government border. Second is the private sector. So Department of Homeland Security has a responsibility to work with the private sector to ensure that their infrastructure is also secure. We have, again, risk management associated with the private sector. What we call our Section 9 organizations, which are private sector companies that have national security significance, sectors like the energy sector, banking and finance. We're also looking at some of our federal policies and how we actually work together with the private sector. And we want them to be successful and make money, but at the same time ensure that our infrastructure is secure. One of the biggest problems we've seen and continue to see, of course, is botnets. And so there's a strong initiative coming out of the White House to look at defense against botnets. We're also looking at electricity disruption. Our biggest concern, of course, is the electric grid goes down. Almost everything else is reliant on electric and the electricity. And the last, of course, is our Defense Department. Another key piece of our federal government infrastructure. Again, Our focus is critical infrastructure as part of the executive order. Additionally, we talk about promoting an open internet. I think we're all in agreement on that. We're also looking at deterrence. Tom Bossert and Rob Joyce both talked about that yesterday. How do we deter the green hoodies that Ian talked about? If we can make it so much harder, then we'll all be better off. And last, in this third area of protecting the nation, is our law enforcement mission and also the strategy internationally. We have to do a better job of working together to secure the borders. Our last area is workforce. There's been some discussion about that, not as much as I would have expected, but in the end, everybody has a shortage. It's great to see so many people out at the conference, especially younger students and some of the parts of the conference for high school students. I think we can't start soon enough with creating the next generation of cyber defenders. So this is our executive order that was discussed briefly yesterday, how we're going to secure our borders. I'm a science and technology guy. I fund research and development. And what we're trying to do is be part of the next generation of technologies to secure the border. If you think about the way we work, we take requirements, we get those from the government, we get those from industry. Our job is to build new technologies. I fund startups, I fund academics, I fund labs, and we create new technologies in the list of technical areas that are at the bottom of the screen. And what we try to do is to take those technologies and commercialize them. Government doesn't anymore create government-specific technologies. Primarily, we're also buying commercial, so let's make sure the research that we fund produces commercial products. I've been at DHS for 13 years, and in that time have been successful in commercializing over 50 technologies that are in the marketplace, many of them still. So I'm going to talk about a number of areas in critical infrastructure. So we have produced a research and development critical infrastructure and security plan. It has been published, as well as an implementation roadmap. The idea here is to help people understand what is important for us in research and development for critical infrastructure. 5 major areas. There are some foundational understandings that we need to have about critical infrastructure systems and how they need to be secured. An electric grid is different than an oil refinery, is different than a banking and finance system. So there are some foundational understanding that we need to have in the community, and I think that's also the case for the researchers. It's hard for a researcher to actually get access to critical infrastructure systems, which is what we're trying to do. Again, risk assessment, Ian talked about it a little bit. How do we deal with risk? We're looking to create technologies, so we're actually funding research, which I'll talk about in the next few slides, all aimed at a unified situational awareness. And most important is our collaboration across critical infrastructure. This is a bit of an eye chart. Don't expect you to read it. The only ones you want to look at are the dark blue lines. These are the 5 areas that we've started with. 1, interdependency analysis. How does one critical infrastructure impact another? 2 is the issue of position, navigation, and time. GPS or other types of positioning systems that are vulnerable. All of our critical infrastructure are relying upon a secure time, and there are some vulnerabilities there. 3rd is water and wastewater, a key sector for us. 4th is, as I said earlier, 4th is transportation, and 5th is energy distribution. So what do we do from an R&D perspective with critical infrastructure? They own and operate the infrastructure. What is the government's job? So our goal from an R&D is to partner with the critical infrastructure. I'm going to talk about a couple of ways we're doing that. First is our Logic project. This is with the oil and gas sector. The idea here is we put money on the table, they put money on the table, they provide the research projects, and we help them execute those research projects. We currently have a number of large companies involved in the activities, not just US companies, because it's not just a US problem. And the goal here is to test new ideas, put them into their operational environment, and help to transition and commercialize. They decide the projects. This is the list of projects that have been done so far. They're all public and out on the web. You can look at the project reports. The most recent one that just we're in the middle of right now is what is called safety instrumented systems. In an oil refinery, their biggest concern is the security systems and the safety systems are being connected together. If I'm successful in compromising a security system and I can get into the safety system, I can cause something bad to happen. The next one is on the energy side, as well as other sectors. This is an academic center run at the University of Illinois, but includes about a dozen other partners. There are also international participants in a way for academic entities here in Israel can participate in this type of a center. If you look at the topics, we're focused on not just technical. So the first one is business case. What is the business case? How do you make the argument for the sector and for some of these companies to invest in the security and cybersecurity of their systems? Also supply chain, we have seen supply chain attacks. We don't want to see those in critical sectors. We're also looking at, again, interdependency analysis and communication. Our third key one is a recent project that just got initiated with the finance sector. So we're actively, jointly with the Department of Treasury, funding new technologies to bring into the finance sector in a commercial consortium structure. So we have a contracting authority, it's called an Other Transaction Authority, that allows us to produce rapid contracts with the commercial partner. The finance sector has identified their 5 key areas in the middle of the chart here. Software, they're concerned about their software, as should everybody. Dynamic defense, network characterization, malware detection, and insider threat. The expectation here is over the course of the next 5 years to spend somewhere around $10 million a year with the finance sector to bring solutions to them. This is open to anyone, including small business, startups, etc. The last one I'm just going to talk about is I'm a huge believer in the international activities. This cybersecurity is a global sport. It's not a US only problem. We have been working with the 14 countries that are shown here and have a strong engagement with Israel, which I'll talk about. So how are we doing this from a research and development position? We're doing bilateral R&D. Our first one was released last month with the Netherlands, and it's one is in industrial control systems. The second topic is in denial of service defenses for DNS. Why do I tell you this? Well, we're in the middle of discussions with our partners here in Israel, and the expectation is, based on conversations yesterday, we hope that by the end of the year, we'll be announcing a similar type of research project between the US and Israel. So what have we learned over the last decade or so? First, you have to build and keep trust. It's always difficult for the government to build trust. A lot of the private sector doesn't trust the government. Once you build that trust, you have to keep it. Everybody has to have skin in the game. So it's not just the government doing this. Industry has to bring money, people, resources to the table. We have to work together to secure our borders. Again, money's not important. It has to be something that is challenging, hard problems for us to solve. If companies can do it quite easily, they should just go do it. We want to join from the government side to solve some of the harder problems. Fourth is deliverables. You know, there have been, for a long time, a lot of what I will just call partnership talkathons, where everybody gets together to discuss the problem, but nobody actually delivers anything. So you've got to produce some deliverables. And last but not least, there are a lot of models for how this can work. We have discovered that having government as the center hub doesn't work. What has to happen is the government really just needs to be a seat at the table, and as we do that, we'll be able to secure our cyber borders. Thank you very much.